Our next question will come from Renters Together, from speaker Noah Rude.
Hello, my name is Noah. Tonight I'm speaking on behalf of Renters Together MHK, a community organization made up of renters for renters. Last year, our ask to the county commissioner candidates was for safe housing by having rental homes inspected by a licensed housing inspector. Well, here we are again. The city's own polling data shows that most people have no idea that the optional inspection program even exists, and that almost no one is requesting to get their homes inspected. As a consequence, we have heard from renters across our community that live in fear of the unsafe housing conditions in their rental units and homes. One of the most notable experiences was the story of veterinarian student Audrey Wilson. Frontier Property Management knowingly rented out a bat-infested apartment close to campus. They terrorized her and her pets every night and defecated all over her furniture. Frontier would not let her out of her lease, and she ended up having to pay for 2 apartments. Once her lease was up, Frontier took all but 19% of her $500 security deposit to pay for cleaning up the bat guano and changing 2 light bulbs. This is not justice. Despite the story appearing on K-State Collegian, nothing was done. We lack a mechanism for accountability. This isn't a renter versus landlord issue. We know many landlords care for their properties and operate to keep our housing ecosystem in good health. However, there are others in our community who do not operate in good faith. It is in all of our interests to make housing resources safe as we court students, military-connected individuals, families, and future residents. To achieve this, we propose that all rental housing units be inspected by a licensed housing inspector before tenants move in. Our neighbors in Lawrence already have a rental housing inspection program that works very well, costing only $17 per unit per year. How many more renters have to experience unsafe housing conditions before the city acts? Do you support rental inspection program? And if you do not, what do you propose to do as an elected leader to solve the issue of unsafe housing in Manhattan?
Thank you, Noah. Our first candidate will be John Mata.
No. I don't support mandatory rental inspections. I think they're bureaucratic, expensive, and practical to do, as this one said, before the renters move in, when you consider K-State and everyone moving in at the same time, and that it violates privacy rights, particularly for the tenant. When we did have our short-term program, I think we cited as many tenants as we did landlords. I think also when the example that was given, a lot of that would have to do with the deposit and the rent and things of that nature. And again, rental inspection won't address any of that. That's between the tenant, the landlord, and we do have the Landlord-Tenant Act. Also, while we do have advocacy groups here, and we're hearing that the people don't know about the volunteer program, I would hope that the groups would be telling them about the volunteer program. The other thing I would be in support of is putting something out there that when someone signs a lease, they have to be notified of the voluntary program so that they can, if they think there's an issue, they can go ahead and get it inspected. And I would urge anyone here, if you hear of a tenant that's giving you a story of someone that's there in an unsafe house, let them know that they can go and get that inspection. And also, if they have a lease, the landlord has to live by that lease and has to do those repairs, and their rent stays the same until that lease is taken care of. And sometimes we hear, well, this is a business, so we must regulate it. You know, the marketplace can take care of it. We have a very good voluntary program. Let's use it and let's notify people.
Thank you, John. Next up is Wynn Butler.
Yeah, I'm not particularly in favor of mandatory rental inspections either, but I think, you know, what we did with our old program when it was voted out, we put in a registration program, and we put in this program where any renter can call and the code office will come and inspect for free. The problem has been that some people aren't calling, and the commission has put in place where the lease should include that now. We voted on that because I could see that was a hole. I think the idea of having a licensed inspector inspect a house before you move in it would be fine, but I'm not sure you've analyzed the cost. I looked that up a couple days ago. For a 1,500 square foot home, it would be $250. If you include mold, which seems to be one of the issues, radon and asbestos, it can be up to $300 more. So you're looking at about $500 to do that inspection. We could pass an ordinance requiring that, but you know who's going to pay for that, right? It's going to be the renter. The renter is going to pay for it. And it's going to put bureaucracy in place, slowing down the rental process. But that could be considered. Now, what have I done to try to improve it? I see right now the hole in our program is this communication. I put a request in as part of the city strategic plan to create what I call a renter-landlord mediation program. And it would be designed very much like medical patient advocacy programs. And the idea here would be to have somebody in a community grant office handle it.
Thank you, Wynn. Next up is Aaron Estabrook.
So I have come to the housing solutions differently in the terms of suitability and affordability, but I think safety is always a component. And I hear where Renters Together is coming from, and the need to put inspections up front is your position, and I definitely respect that. I'm trying to get there potentially through other means of affordability and aligning this housing stock in our community, which is just inherently unsafe. It's in a larger scope. They're old homes that were chopped up and remade into student apartments, and to undo that is not going to be a successful operation through an inspection program. Now, an inspection program, once they're realigned or purposed back to workforce housing or what those options might be, is going to be a natural component of that in my mind. And also, you know, not to knock our risk reduction people. I think whenever they're utilized, it's been very effective. I manage some properties, and occasionally those residents will call city risk reduction to come and do an inspection, and they tell us, you know, this needs to be fixed in the next 10 to 14 days, and they come back and check on it, and, you know, we fix it. They get results. So I think that if anything that needs to be done from the landlord's perspective. So I don't support at this point, but maybe in the future.
Thank you, Aaron. Next up is Usher Ready.
Thank you. What we have right now, as was mentioned, is a rental registration program, and I'm not sure it's working as we wanted it to be. I tried to get on the map today to see where all the rental registrations are, and it wasn't up, it wasn't working. So I don't even know how many registrations are registered in our community, so that's a problem. So I do think there's lots of room for improvement, and even if your rental property is registered, you know, it says on our website, it says it's important to note that the registration of a rental dwelling does not indicate that it meets all requirements of the city of Manhattan. So that's a problem. So just knowing there's a rental property is not enough. We don't know what's going on. And even though we put youngsters such as yourself trying to make a complaint, you know, you're worried about retaliation or not knowing what to do or where to find it, or what do you do if you can't afford something else and you're already tied to a lease. So there's lots of education that needs to be involved. I do think we need to work closely with Kansas State University, and this doesn't just impact students, it impacts our senior citizens, it impacts vulnerable populations. I was a single mom for a long time, and I struggled just to keep my house, but if I lost my house, I don't know what I would have done. But I do know I let go a lot of maintenance during that time because I just couldn't afford it. So I think these are things we need to look at a little bit closer, continue to have those discussions, look at how the projects are working in other communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Usha. Next up is Rich Jankovic.
Sorry for the bats. I've dealt with them, even here in a newer home, and they're no fun. But taking that aside, I was on the commission during the rental inspection issue. We looked at other ways when it was repealed to try and make it better. I worked with the SGA as they tried to formulate something. They were trying to go off of the Fort Collins model, which was about 290 pages long. I got them down to a point where we had a nice one-page document, and we started working together with the Landlord Association, which I think is very critical. And that began to move the bar to where the students felt non-threatened, and actually all renters would have felt non-threatened by calling code or now risk prevention, that would allow them to make that call when they did have an issue and it wasn't being solved. Our daughter-in-law was living in an apartment similar to that. Now, she happened to live in a unit that was carved, but the landlord was solid. And that's one of the dichotomies we have. We have really good actors and we have some okay actors and other non-actors. We also have the issue, the owner has to be notified of issues, but there's a property manager in between, and you noted one. And that's one of the difficulties and was the hope of that registration. So yeah, I'm in favor of trying to find a way to make sure that we're absolutely safe. It has to be cost effective to the city and the taxpayers and the renters, because they're taxpayers as well.
Thank you, Rich. Next up is Caleb James.
Thank you. No, I'm not in favor of mandatory rental inspections, and the reason is cost. And that cost is going to go down to the people who are renting, and a lot of the people who have issues with the places they're renting can't afford additional expenses anyway. And so when you run the numbers of between $300 to $500, depending on where you get it from, what all you're inspecting, and you break that out over an average college, 10-month lease, talking about $50 a month. Then you already have spend-heavy commissions and want to raise property taxes. Those costs are passed down again. So you're talking about an extra $100 a month out of people who already can't afford it. What I have proposed in the past and have tried to push for is for the front page of every lease to have the information, and it has to be signed by the landlord and the leasee for code enforcement, and on there to boldly state that no retaliation can be made if they contact code enforcement. And I think that's the way we need to go. It reduces the cost on the taxpayer, reduces the cost on the renter, and then it puts it up front on the lease to let them know that they have the backing of the city commission of the law, that if there is an issue that violates code, they can call, make that complaint without fear of reprisal. Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. Next up is Monica McFarland.
Hello, Noah. We talked when I first went and filed to run, and it's because the first thing I stated that I was going to run on was rental inspections, and I still will run on rental inspections. I do believe that they are absolutely necessary. I believe that if you rent out a home, it is no longer a personal place that you are dwelling, it is a business, and it should be inspected as such. And to sit here and say that the cost is too great, well, people's health and safety is too great to not invest in. This is an extremely important issue in our community, and it can be done. It is done in Lawrence, as you pointed out. That is one of the programs that I would try and actually emulate. Another half of the program that I would try and emulate is something that I saw when I lived in Savannah that would actually help the landlords make these improvements on the homes. If they can apply to the city for a loan, which is actually done through a bank that has become federally licensed, they can put in dollar for dollar up to $30,000 to have improvements made on the home. During the time that they're paying back that loan, they can't rent out that place for more than 80% of the fair market value. Therefore, you're helping the affordability end too. So we can address safety. We can address affordability. We can make you both safe and affordable here. And we absolutely do need to put in rental inspections.
Thank you, Monica.
Our last question